no longer when in Rome, it's when in Burundi, I think. More fitting. Mzwai Lembeja is joining us in this discussion.
And Mzwai, Natasha ends off on a very interesting note there, and that is a note that touches on his friendship with President Olusegun Obasanjo. And that was a friendship that also became a critical part and also forms part of who, Umntwana kaPhinda Ngene was.
Oh yes, a very good morning to the viewers. As much as he was a traditional leader, he was a politician, he was a religious man, he was a family man, he was also a politician with an outlook globally. I mean, who can forget his friendship with people like Margaret Thatcher, his friendship with the former US President, the late Ronald Reagan. So all those people, Helmut Koch of Germany, so those were the people he was friends with. In fact, when I look at President Obasanjo, you'd recall just before the elections, the international mediation that he needed to get done. For a peace process of South Africa, there were also people from outside, and you know who brokered that one? One of the friends in Kenya.
And you think about, President Reagan, for example, in 83, and there he is, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, welcomed for prayer, and Thanksgiving at the White House. These are some of the moments, as you say, that he was not only South African, whether politically speaking, whether family, whether whatever aspect, his reach was far wider than our borders.
Absolutely. Even before the fallout with the ANC, so he had a lot of even people within the ANC who really looked up to him. But of course, as the strategies of how to attain the liberation moved on, so there were disagreements. So in the process, he had also met a number of key players, also being assisted by the fact that he was from a royal house, so to speak, and then that attachment did and then give them that elevation. So he was able to use all of those to then engage with a number of people from outside. I mean, he went to Fort Hare, met with people like Robert Mugabe, so he was very good friends with the late Kenneth Kaunda. So you can see, yes, he was a man from Ulundi, South Africa, but also internationally he played a very crucial role, particularly to those organizations which were more aligned to what the IFP would represent going forward.
Well, the history is important, isn't it? Context always important. The starting of the cultural, what was termed the cultural organization, Yenkululeko Yesizwe, and how it transformed in the 70s to the 90s into Nkatha Freedom Party. Talk to us as political editor of the SABC, your interactions with him, the man, the politician. What were some of the standouts?
Well, it was very interesting. If obviously I were to speak about myself, my personal experience, I interacted with him at a much later stage in his political life. So I may not have witnessed some of the issues that were very key.
You're not that old, that's why.
Some of the very key issues that defined him, particularly when people talk about the 80s and the 90s. Obviously, we were not there, but obviously you as a student would learn about these things, you would interact, and then you will interrogate some of those things. So my interaction, in fact, one of the memorable ones that I remember when the IFP was launching its election in 2019. So I came to cover that event. So he had invited, talking about what we were speaking about, his global friends, the King of Congo. And then he called me and then he said, because of the nature of the job you do, of covering the presidents all over, he said, this is your king, because time and again you are in Congo, so this is the king. So that is the lighter side to him. But of course, very, very sharp-witted, very knowledgeable. So one thing that you needed to do if you were to have an interview with him, that subject matter, you needed to do your thorough research, because he had memory. They say memory of an elephant.
Yes.
So if you speak about something that you are not sure about, he'll just take you back, and then you'll be thrown completely off your line of questioning. So that's one thing I learned from him.
It takes me back to a funny story, that he was gracious as well. I remember, I think it was back in 2014 where we had an interview with him, and it was a hard interview, talking about the violence in the 80s and 90s. So there was no sweetheart questions that I had to pose to him. The interview lasted about half an hour. Technician then runs in and says, you know what, we didn't record. He looks at me and
that's
he says,
a journalist's worst moment, right?
I wish the earth would split and then I fall in. And then I look at him and I said, Prince, would you be so gracious as to do it again? I know, we did it for half an hour now. And he says, let's do it. So it just showed you, the interview was difficult, but he was completely gracious and completely humble enough to sit with me for another half an hour and do it all again. It talks to his personality.
It really does, Blaine. And also just watching those visuals, Naren Singh with President Cyril Ramaphosa as well. And Mzwai, listening to what you and Blaine are sharing, and of course I would have interviewed him a number of times when, the IFP would be campaigning for elections. Earlier on, we had a conversation with Blessed Kwala, Mr. Blessed Kwala. And he was saying, for him, this also becomes a difficult path for the party, but at the same time, as they look ahead to the 2024 elections, they need to make sure that they get everything right.
It is a big opportunity for them, a defining moment, in fact. I was speaking to a number of them. I actually said,
all right, so I think, Mzwai, let's just listen. We're seeing Amabutho are coming in, and we can also hear Inyosi. Let's listen in.
wabona ukhanya kwaso uyawasibalekela waqonde ebhanguzweni obefuna ukusinda obefuna ukugodwa sihlahle samsithi nosiyanda uyawasibalekela waqonde ebhanguzweni obefuna ukusinda obefuna ukugodwa uzwa athi oliphehlwe zinduna ezakithi kwaZulu zenza uxokozelela odabankulu kaLukhasi ongwavuma kasophunga bathi gqabukile imbeleko wena kanqengelele umhlane wakho unameva unjengowengungumbana obemkasela qoqo ubeqoqola sitha khona lapha kwasishuli indlaphuna ebendlaphuna usetsheu yebo kasosica wena kasimbu kanye nomziyathi kacimbile yajila ebelibona uvuka ibambe ugebethu lenkunzi yakithi amadakadunuse inkunzi elikhakhayi lubanzi yakithi ekushumayeleni siphuza goloko negazi lakhona uyadela umluba simadaka obona uShenge sevunule umpethu njengesona yebo kabakayise ijazi landinda kwamashona umphuhlane othetha komzamadaka okhwela amakhilimba umdlavuza udlavuza izinduna bese sekushumayeleni udlavushawuvu ebeze ngamakhoba adlavuza ngamandla ebeze ngosikimbilisi imbangamba bayisuse ngenhlamvu eyakushumayela yadela mame wabona izimpunga ezazimbili ezazixhobana phansi kwentaba zithi zendlango bathi zemgundlovu sihlahla sentambangwe swababili amadoda samadaka ingedlange edlane eyabingedla amadoda wena wemuxesindwa lishobalayo iyakusabu kwela mazibuko esinye singumnyakanya intantezana enjengosobhuzayo umaxesha egcikeni obenjengenaliti inyanga bethi file yebo kade yathwese ethose kuyibanda ebeze umciso avuka mayamana engokadunuzela kulela wanetha wemshoyo maniki so abanye abafuna ukulima abanye bagogula ukulima isintonda ngesawise esikane kube nogoza ezindoda abantu babingelela sibejenga utshwala abamndondo kubile exhibeni ubemxeshwa njengenyathelo kosondayo wayithwala ngenqoma wayiletha ithondini wathahlafuna Shenge nakamanqobo wathatha bona kangwane 20,000 la shisheke wamabuza nani maswazi nizwina nendaba ivula nesithotho kathongoye zaphela ijodeni asala amablopheni uhlafuna ushifa umzitembe phansi kwanoyengile amabuza babashitha ushifa umhlamzima amaqondo marisbeki mdidwe bayabaya UDF Kosato ANC zonke Shenge ziyabuya nawe ziyamvuma uMameni umkhuzi woDlame owazifikela kathatha olikonda bela Mandela bavala bakhuza ngophepha njengoba zonkhozi yaphuzukuzwa kade zamakhona siyashesha kuba ngakazi khona iyazi wona zamamvu ngazibona sibindikiti wakwaphindelela twana wavula babasha ngamathusa entabasela noshona ushabo thandana kaptani ishenge lihle engenasundela lingabana sundela lifuze kanonina untanga sabatha mabele ezabathishane zimbangele sundela tundela sawasani ipusa mnaphu yaphuma sakhe zabalazulu babo yaphuma yahlophwa ubhuti wasiko wethukela ikwahela bonke yaphuma wathwala abasuthu nomuzi lapha kasko sabasuthu onkoto bwana bakanda hlasa chithe rasotia ziyathana ushiyona bihamu hawla salam khoshaneni ngoyama kwasi kabe yakhonkoto yakhona imzila ubikisa abakukhulu bakunikabi abinishoma batha bayihla nguluzela umnyamuza nafuna sikhonyane sihlaba kusaba qedani sibabeka lefeleleni yebi nkasa yabo umzibukhuni webehluliwe ebihla bathaphuni ibehluliwe abakudlana bezalphona umkoto umkhaphusa mazolo Shenge Shenge Solisa ibutho lele line flag phezulu livimbe endleleni licela lizohlala phansi lihloniphe njengaleli linye ibutho eliselihlezi phansi leli abutho okune flag cela sihlale phansi sidede endleleni sihloniphe njengaleli linye ibutho esehleli phansi
ikakhulukazi odabeni lokuthi ungubani ngoba phela amasiko uyazi lesi sizwe ke siyaqhubeka nawo kodwa njengoba usushilo akugcine lapho ngokuthi ebe umuntu ohola abantu bendabuko kuphela. He's a politician. That's why you see a number of political parties. I mean, we have seen the leader of the DA, the leader of the EFF, the leader of COPE, of course IFP, they are the main ones. And then of course, I saw also the Secretary General of the ANC, Fikile Mbalula, representing the ANC. Remember, the president is here as head of state, as he has declared this funeral special, official funeral category 1. So that tells you. So it is multifaceted. So it's got so many elements, political elements, religious elements, and of course, izinto zesintu njengoba sibona Amabutho nabantu bekhombisa ukujabula ikakhulukazi ke nomphakathi i-community la yakhulele kuyo.
Multifaceted like his legacy as well, isn't it? Freedom, as they say, is not free. It takes blood, sweat and tears. Realism is important. Context is important. It allows us to process what was and what is. We've heard Prince Buthelezi speaking on his legacy, saying that he wanted to be remembered as serving the whole country, all races. But I guess it'll be up to the people who are watching here, the people in the stadium as well, to decide for themselves what his passing means for them, for their families, for their communities. What sort of sentiment are you hearing on the ground, Mzwai, when you go throughout the country, hearing about the legacy of Prince Buthelezi? We will answer that in a short while. Let's just listen in. as we take in the sights and sounds of the special official funeral category 1. Mzondele Mbecha is our political editor at the SABC. Just talking to him about the sentiment he was hearing for the past week or so with regard to the legacy of Prince Buthelezi.
You know, Blaine, obviously from these areas, from where we are, from those who have always followed him, who have always supported him, from his political party. So they speak of a man who they have looked up to. And then you take it a step further to his political opponents, those he has sparred over with for so many times. They speak of a man who sticks to his principles, but of course of a man who perhaps could have done things much differently, because if you jot your history back, so there will be so many other issues that people will not agree on. And then you speak of someone who was a traditional leader. Because of his busy schedule, he was not even in that space.
Yeah.
So he appointed a regent to focus on his other work. So it really depends in terms of the people you interact with and the facets of life that he journeyed through. That's where you'll get your answers. So from the political perspective, Blaine, it's very contested. In fact, even in politics, what you can do, in his later years, he was an elder statesman. In the 80s and 90s, very controversial part. In the beginning, very, very party and aligned to what the governing party is.
And I want us to talk about the choice of songs in just a moment that we also have been hearing here as some of the people have been coming through. But of course, as Blaine said a little earlier on, we've got reporters deployed to various parts of this particular stadium, and one of them is Natasha Piri, who is standing by with the guest. Natasha?
Thank you so much, Bongi. I'm now joined by the National Secretary of the IFP's Youth Brigade, Mr. Mabaso, and of course he's also a councillor in the city of Johannesburg. Mr. Mabaso, thank you so much for joining us on SABC News. I mean, as a young person and as the National Secretary of the IFP's Youth Brigade, what values have you learned from Umntwana Pindangen?
Well, let me first appreciate the nation for how they have responded. What you see here is a reflection of his hard work. People are here to pay their last respect because of the kind of a leader he was, and that's one of the things we learned from Umntwana, that he was leading people, he was not away from the people, he was with the people, he was on the ground with the people. I mean, he never moved out of Matabatini, and that's why we are at Ulundi, at a regional stadium, because that's the kind of the man he was. And we really appreciate, all the services that he provided for the people of this country. We appreciate, the hard work, that he did for the people of this country. And we have learned, that when you are a leader and when you are elected, to lead people, you must be with them on the ground. You must stay with them, and you must understand the challenges that they face on daily basis, so that you are able to respond directly to the issues that people are facing.
His passing comes at a critical time for the party. The party is gearing up for next year's elections. We heard your president giving a clarion call at the memorial service, saying that the party needs to grow in his memory. How will you ensure that you fulfill his wishes?
Well, we need to carry his legacy forward. We need to consolidate these numbers that you see here. We really need to consolidate them, because we cannot fail. Umntwana, he worked hard to establish this organization. You know how he vilified for this organization. You know how he was attacked for this organization. So we need to make sure that we protect this organization, we grow this organization, we consolidate these numbers, we expand, even to other provinces where we are non-existent, so that his organization grow beyond to what it is right now.
Okay, well, thank you so much. That was Mr. Mabaso, the National Secretary of the IFP's Youth Brigade. We now know that the motto remains.
Show
Shoni, Umputalu Wagiti, Yabendam Samatara, Uskola Bakilimba, Shafusa, Sia Shafusa, Mabuta Fasituna, Rasavita Shmayanin, Mabuta Sam Shavu, Obasalama Kaba, Washafu Samanta, Obasalas Pilisi, Umbaba Susan Tambo Shumena, by Sang Pansy, Ubu Shumena, we are Taname, Osematara, Ubani Puma, Sasipili, Santamana Pascodama, Satan Shakubo, Katisam Kuchu, Satan Samaba, Soma Samatara, Ingata Shane, Agatamata, Yaba Samatara, Umkamini, Yabama Sarasi, Yabsa Hotara, Utamuna Malusha, Cocoto Samatara, Umbabana, La Perfacona, Nengana, Napoto Fulana, Tuana Pugasa, Malayo, Yabuan Masuan, Usaya Sofiana, Udana Sana Sopusa. We are not defeated, but Yatasa, we banda, Umpiso, Yafuma, Obesa to Museli, Obamata Tabupasa, Unga Topi, Better Fulala, Worm Shamanigi, Usawa Tuklima, please don't as we say, Savanova, Saston, Yabu, Jean Chuana, Utonina, Yabakani, Ubemba Shura, Ubeshan Yati, Yabba Sotaba, Tuana, Fulana, Shabana, Santa Sala, Shona, Ushano Tata, Ishak, Egana Sumela, Ligamana Sumela, Lifusa Canina, Utama, Asabafishane, Zimana Shana, Situmela, Samasanin, Impus Kamnapu, Airpuma Santa Sabasuru, by Bamba. Shopruba, Uputa was over the Twitter, Ivo Yamamosa, Yasha, Puanamaka Dashasa, Tanana, Ulshana, Blaskan Toshamani, Wasi, I know Yes, it's going to Sabatata, Benini, Kuni, Imashuna Mkotona, I'm going to Umkapusa Maso. Ukatembea sila tisha mbotato umna poko punyugala esela umna thangamonde obuthwa besu crossishofu yebo nesinyama yebo ngesikiti yebo kanobamba usonke siphuma ibuyibhebese umna mkhabela yedwa bayibhebesalayo inghayimatana yabekalusulu yakhalubelebele yakhalukubu yakhalibhangiso yakhaluswela yakhalubulayo inghayimatana yabebelebeleni nyoni yamakhala yabekhalusulu yalusulu ebeselima ebethendlima insimpedla madoda sheshelisa wamahono lahlabana phedula ngoba baneyembesi umkhonto uyanabende kwasokuthesi wasokunomshosho yabemahwahwani umntwana zimnengwani zimnengasokana umntwana ngakithi yabona mayina ongasekufa yabona amadliso nangamaloyiso kephekufa yabona phuluphala isidla iya yabasemundwandwe isiyengayengane esiyenghabantu ngoba sesiyengabantwandwe sabakhutha amakhanda tuwana wakashabencane itheshumayeleni ubisimadlanga luhlanganele hanangwebu sihlahla simsithi samsithi umaxabana obesayobhaphule wasibalekela wabaleka wamonde ebhasoni webona ukhaya waso wabesakusinda wabesakuguntula sihlahla simsithi sisithi ubhaphuna obesaloyanda wasibalekela wabaleka naye wamonde ebhasoni webona ukhaya waso wabesakusinda wabesakuguntula sihlahla simsithi sisithi uqabela obesalomadwala wasibalekela wabaleka naye waqonde ebhasweni webona ukhaya waso wabesakusinda